All right, so we're diving deep today, and I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah,
We're tackling Ardra Nakshatra.
it's a big one.
Yeah, it is, and it's one of those lunar mansions in Vedic astrology that just has like a reputation, you know?
Definitely. Yeah, it's intense.
It is, it's intense. And I think for people who are, maybe new to Vedic astrology or even folks who've been studying it for a while, Ardra can seem like a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
There is. So, we're going to try to break it down.
We're gonna do our best to unpack it all.
Yeah, and unpack it all. Really look at the symbolism, the
The
mythology,
stories,
the personality.
personalities, the kind of energy that it brings.
I think, even if Ardra isn't super prominent in your chart,
Right.
just understanding it can give you a lot of insight.
Exactly, because it's like one of those I don't know, like a force of nature, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. You can't ignore it.
You can't ignore it, right? So let's start with the basics. The name itself, Ardra.
Yeah. It's got this connection to moisture,
Ah,
to tears, even to like the power of Rudra. So
yes.
so where does that what's the core meaning there?
I think the moisture aspect is really interesting because it ties into this idea of sorrow. Like when you're sad, you cry, right? You
Yeah.
have tears. And Ardra is very much connected to this emotional release, this idea of letting go.
Okay.
But it's not just about being sad. It's about recognizing that sometimes, you need to go through a period of emotional cleansing, even if it's painful, to make way for something new.
That makes sense. Like a purging.
Yeah, like a storm almost.
Right, right. And the symbolism too.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have the teardrop which fits in with that sorrow, that transformation.
Hmm.
But then, the symbol of Ardra is also the human head.
Which is fascinating.
Right. So what does that bring into the mix?
Well, the head represents the intellect, right?
Mhm.
The mind. So with Ardra, we're not just dealing with raw emotions, but also how we process them, how we think about them. And Ardra is in Gemini, which is all about duality.
Right.
So maybe that head symbol also speaks to that.
Right, like an internal struggle, maybe?
Maybe, yeah, like this constant back and forth within the mind.
Okay, so then we have Rudra, who is like the presiding deity over Ardra.
Yeah, he's a big deal.
Right. And he's, a fierce form of Shiva.
A very powerful, even destructive force.
Right. But Shiva is also the destroyer and creator, right?
Exactly. And that's really important to remember with Rudra too.
So how does Rudra's energy specifically influence Ardra?
I think the best way to understand it is to think of a thunderstorm,
Okay.
right? It can be really intense. You have lightning, thunder, wind, rain.
Powerful.
It can be destructive, even scary.
Yeah.
But afterwards,
Yeah.
the air is clean, everything feels fresh and renewed.
Yeah.
And that's Rudra. That's Ardra. It's about breaking things down to build them back up stronger.
Okay, I see.
So it's not just about destruction, it's about transformation.
Transformation. Right. And then we have like the whole mythology.
Oh, the stories are incredible.
I love the story. So the story of Queen Maya, the mother of Buddha,
Yeah.
she has this dream of a white elephant, right?
Right, which is a very auspicious symbol.
Right. But like, what's the connection to Ardra?
Well, the white elephant represents immense good fortune, power, greatness.
Hmm.
It's often seen as a symbol of someone who will achieve great things.
Right, right. And in this case, it was Buddha.
Exactly. And the fact that it was a dream is also significant
Oh, so?
because dreams are often seen as messages from the subconscious, from the divine even.
Got-
So it's like this premonition of Buddha's, his destiny, his potential.
Right, this huge destiny. And there were all these wise men who interpreted the dream, right?
Yeah. 64 of them.
64, wow.
And they all agreed that Queen Maya's son would either be a great world ruler
Right.
or a great spiritual teacher.
Oh, wow.
So again, that duality.
Right. And that's like Ardra all over.
Exactly. Ardra is all about this potential for transformation, for going in different directions.
So it's not like preordained.
No, it's about choice. It's about the path you choose to take.
Right, right. And the white elephant itself, it has a connection to Burning Nakshatra, right?
Yeah, which is the birth star of Vishnu.
Right. So what does that add to the story?
Well, Vishnu is the preserver, the maintainer.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the white elephant also represents this desire for stability, for harmony.
Interesting. So you have like the potential for both like these great things, but also for maintaining order.
Right. And I think it's interesting that Queen Maya died shortly after giving birth to Buddha,
Oh, yeah, that is interesting.
because it brings in the element of death,
Yeah.
of loss.
Right, and that's also connected to Bernie, right?
Exactly. Bernie is also associated with Yama, the god of death.
Right.
So you have this cycle of birth and death,
Mhm.
creation and destruction.
Wow, so many layers.
Yeah, it's like to create something new, something old has to die.
And that's Ardra.
Exactly. It's about letting go of the old to make way for the new.
Okay, so we've got Ardra in Gemini
Mm-hmm.
and Bernie in Aries.
Yeah.
And there's like an astrological connection there through Shiva, right?
Yeah, there is. If you count 11 houses from Gemini, you land in Aries.
Okay.
And the 11th house is all about desires.
Desires.
And in this case, we're talking about the desires of Shiva.
Okay, so Bernie, which is Vishnu's nakshatra,
Right.
represents the desires of Shiva.
In a way, yes. It's like Ardra's placement in Gemini has this wish fulfillment aspect that's connected to Bernie and Aries.
Okay, so it's not just like a random story.
No, not at all.
Right.
It's deeply symbolic.
Right. And then you have like the choice that Buddha faced.
Right, to stay in the palace and rule,
Or-
or to go out into the world and face suffering.
And ultimately he chose the path of leaving the palace, right?
He did. He chose the path of transformation.
And that's so Shiva.
Yeah, it is. It's about confronting the darkness, the pain,
Yeah.
and through that confrontation, finding enlightenment.
Right. And that's Ardra's energy too.
Exactly. It's not always easy, but it's powerful.
Now we talked about Ardra being considered kind of like an outcast.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect.
Yeah. And it has to do with the star Betelgeuse, right?
Yeah, Betelgeuse is the main star associated with Ardra,
Right.
and it's actually located outside of the main band of the zodiac.
Okay, so it's kind of like an outsider.
Yeah, it doesn't quite fit in with the conventional framework.
And how does that like translate to people who have Ardra strong in their chart?
Well, they often feel like outsiders too.
Really?
Yeah, they don't always feel comfortable in conventional settings.
Like urban environments.
Yeah, exactly. They might feel more drawn to nature, to the wild.
Right.
They might also be, more resistant to rules and authority.
That makes sense. Like
Of
they're
course.
not rule followers.
Not always, no. They have their own internal compass.
Right. And this also kind of ties into like the unconventional interests
Oh, yeah.
that we often see with Ardra, right?
Right. They often have very unique hobbies and passions.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, you have people like Mike Tyson with his tiger,
Oh yeah,
Justin Bieber with his monkey, Elvis had a kangaroo,
a
apparently.
kangaroo. Wow.
So they're often drawn to exotic animals, things that are unusual.
Yeah, things that are a bit wild.
Exactly. And it's not just animals.
Okay.
They might also be interested in things like tornado chasing, meteorology, things that involve dealing with powerful natural forces.
So there's like this connection to the untamed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like they have this primal energy within them.
Okay, so that's the positive side, but then there's also this shadow side to Ardra.
Right. There's always two sides to the coin.
Yeah, and it can get like pretty dark.
It can. If that Ardra energy isn't channeled constructively, it can manifest in negative ways.
Like how so?
Well, there's a potential for criminal tendencies.
Really?
Yeah. And it's not because they're, inherently bad people.
Right.
But it's because that frustration, that feeling of being an outsider, if it's not dealt with, it can turn inwards.
Right, and then it comes out.
And then it can explode outward.
And that's scary.
It can be. And, the source even mentions serial killer instincts.
Wow, that's intense.
It is. But again, it's about understanding that duality of Ardra.
Right.
The potential for both good and bad.
And then the mention of suicidal tendencies.
Yeah, that's a very sensitive topic.
It is, but it's important to address.
It is. And, I think it ties back to that feeling of abandonment.
Abandonment.
Yeah. Remember the story of Rudra's birth?
Right. He was kind of abandoned, right?
Yeah, he was born from the anger of the gods, and then he was kind of rejected.
Rejected, yeah. So it's like there's this deep-seated wound.
Yeah. And that can manifest in Ardra natives as this feeling of not belonging, of being unwanted.
And that can lead to like really dark places.
It can, yeah. If it's not addressed, it can lead to a sense of hopelessness.
Right. And then we have the story of Rudra rejecting the names
Oh, yeah.
that were given to him until he chose his 8th name.
That's a powerful story.
It is. So what does that tell us about Ardra?
I think it shows that Ardra natives have this strong sense of self.
Cool.
Even if it takes them a while to figure it out,
Right.
they're not going to just accept whatever labels are put on them.
Yeah.
They're going to find their own path.
Their own path, yeah. And then there's this concept of Rudra.
Right, which are the tears of Rudra.
Right, and they're seen as a source of healing.
Yeah, it's this idea that even through suffering there can be transformation.
Oh,
that
yeah.
that our tears can be a source of healing, of cleansing.
So it's like acknowledging the pain.
Yeah, and then letting it go.
Letting it go, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned this phrase, restore to factory settings.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
So how does that apply to Ardra?
Well, it's like Ardra natives have this primal instinct to go back to basics, to strip away all the artificial stuff,
Right.
and just be who they truly are.
Like their authentic selves.
Exactly. And that can be a really powerful process.
But it can also be like really disruptive.
It can, yeah. Because it means challenging the status quo.
Right, right. And then the whole thing about the reptilian brain.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept.
It is. So what does that mean in relation to Ardra?
Well, it's like Ardra natives have this strong connection to their instincts,
Okay.
to their primal urges.
Primal urges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to act on them.
Right. So it's like they're very in touch with that part of themselves.
Yeah, and it can be both a blessing and a curse.
How so?
Well, it can give them this incredible intuition, this ability to see things that others miss.
Yeah.
But it can also make them impulsive, even reckless.
Right, right. And then there's the obsession with sharp objects.
Yeah, that's a classic Ardra trait.
And that's connected to Rudra's arrow, right?
Yeah, exactly. The arrow represents power, precision, focus.
Right, right. And then the tendency to challenge boundaries.
Oh, yeah, they don't like to be boxed in.
They don't like to be told what to do.
Oh, no, they have to do things their own way.
Their own way, yeah. And you even mentioned your own, like, culinary preferences.
Yeah, I do have some unusual tastes.
Yeah, and that could be like an Ardra thing, right?
It could be, yeah. Rahu, which rules Ardra, is all about, breaking taboos.
Right, pushing limits.
Exactly. So Ardra natives might be drawn to things that are considered strange or taboo by others.
Okay, okay. So we talked about a lot of like the intense stuff, but Ardra also has this incredible healing potential.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's not all doom and gloom.
Right. So how does that manifest?
Well, remember that Rudra is also a healer.
Right.
He carries a pouch of herbs.
Oh yeah.
And Ardra natives often have this natural affinity for healing.
Okay.
They might be drawn to alternative medicine, to working with plants,
Right.
to using their hands to heal.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because they're also connected to things like meteorology,
Yeah.
witchcraft, alchemy.
Shamanism.
Right. So it's like they're working with these forces that most people don't really understand.
Right. They're not afraid to explore the unknown, the unseen.
Yeah. And despite all the challenges, Ardra is considered a very spiritual nakshatra.
It is. It's a nakshatra of evolution.
Evolution, right. So it's like you have to go through the fire to be transformed.
Exactly. And that's why the path of Ardra can be so difficult.
Right.
But it can also lead to incredible spiritual growth.
Right, right. And we have examples of people who have achieved great spiritual heights.
Yeah, like Shankaracharya.
Yeah.
He had his ascendant in Ardra. And he's considered by many to be an incarnation of Rudra himself.
So he embodies that Ardra energy.
Yeah, he does. And then you have Ramanujacharya, who had his moon in Ardra.
Okay.
And he was also a very influential spiritual teacher.
So these are people who really embody the higher potential of Ardra.
Absolutely. They show that even though the path is tough,
Right.
it's possible to achieve great things.
To achieve greatness, yeah. And it's interesting that the root word of ardent
Yeah.
is Hara, which is another name for Shiva.
Right. Which speaks to the passion of Ardra.
Right. So they're very passionate people.
Yeah, they have this fire within them.
Okay, so we talked about some physical traits and tendencies
Yeah.
that are associated with Ardra.
Right. And these are just observations, of course.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone with Ardra strong in their chart is going to like fit this description perfectly.
Of course not. But it's interesting to see the patterns.
Right. So what are some of the things that have been observed?
Well, there's this tendency for women with strong Ardra influence to have like more masculine qualities.
Really?
Yeah, like they might have facial hair or a more muscular build,
Oh, interesting.
and that could be, connected to that strong Rudra energy.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's the love for animals.
Oh yeah, they love animals,
Yeah, yeah.
especially dogs.
Dogs. Yeah.
Yeah, they often have this deep connection with creatures.
Right. And they can also be like a bit egotistical.
Yeah, they can have a strong sense of self,
Right.
which, can be a good thing, but it can also lead to arrogance.
Arrogance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also have a keen sense of smell.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation.
It is.
Yeah.
And they're good at imitating others.
Yeah, they can be very adaptable.
Adaptable, yeah. But they also tend to have a pessimistic outlook.
Yeah, they can be a bit doom and gloom sometimes.
Right. The glass half empty.
Exactly. And, that might be because of all the challenges they've faced.
Right. Right. It's
Yeah.
like they've seen the dark side of things.
Yeah, and that can make it hard to be optimistic.
Right. And then there's the potential for challenges with elder siblings and the father figure.
Yeah, those relationships can be a bit tricky.
Tricky. And that's because of the 11th house connection, right?
Yeah, the 11th house is ruled by Rahu for Ardra ascendants.
Right?
And Rahu can be a bit of a troublemaker.
Troublemaker, yeah. And then the father figure, that's connected to the Rudra Brahma conflict, right?
Yeah, exactly. Rudra had a bit of a rebellious streak,
Rebellious streak, yeah.
and that can manifest as issues with authority figures.
Right, right. So it's like they're always questioning authority.
Yeah, they're not afraid to challenge the status quo.
And that can lead to like activism,
Absolutely. They might be very passionate about social justice issues.
animal rights.
Yeah, animal rights is a big one.
Right, because of that connection to the animal world.
Exactly. And then there's the potential interest in exotic meats and hunting.
Hunting. So it's like that primal instinct again.
Yeah. It's about connecting with nature in a very raw way.
Right, right. And then the association with morticians.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
It is. And it makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does, because Ardra is all about death and transformation.
Right. And morticians are like right there on the front lines.
Yeah, they're dealing with death on a daily basis.
So it's like they're comfortable with that energy.
Yeah. And, it's not necessarily a morbid thing.
No.
It's just a different way of looking at life and death.
Right, right. So ultimately, Ardra is like a rough diamond.
Yeah, it is. It needs to be polished.
Polished. And that polishing happens through life experiences.
Yeah, through challenges, through hardships.
Right. And it's not always easy.
No, it's not, but it's worth it.
It's worth it.
Well,
Because when that diamond is
it
polished,
shines brightly.
it shines brightly, yeah. So for someone who has Ardra strong in their chart,
Mhm.
what are some ways they can like master this energy?
Well, the first step is awareness.
Awareness, right? Like knowing what you're dealing with.
Exactly. And then it's about making conscious choices.
Right. So instead of like giving into those negative tendencies,
Yeah.
you can choose to use that energy in a more positive way.
Right. So, for example, instead of being irritable, you can choose to be assertive.
Assertive, yeah.
Instead of feeling ungratefulness, you can choose to cultivate gratitude.
Gratitude, yeah.
Instead of being insincere, you can choose to be honest and authentic.
Right. And it's also important to like build up self-esteem.
Yeah, that's crucial. Because Ardra natives can be very sensitive,
Yeah.
so they need to have a strong sense of self-worth.
Right. And it's also about like learning to manage those emotions.
Yeah, not letting them control you.
Right. Staying cool under pressure.
Exactly. And, isolation can be a problem for Ardra natives
Right.
because they often feel like outsiders. So it's important to find healthy ways to connect with others.
Right. And to find activities that give them that thrill.
Yeah, that excitement that they crave.
Right. So it's about like channeling that energy.
Yeah, finding constructive outlets for it.
Constructive outlets, right.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it can be like really destructive.
It can, yeah.
Right.
But when it's mastered, it can be incredibly powerful.
Powerful, yeah. And you mentioned the 64th Navamsa.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic.
It is. But it's connected to Ardra, right?
Yeah, it's like a deeper layer of understanding the soul's purpose.
Okay.
And it's something that, people who are really interested in Ardra might want to explore further.
Right, right. So to wrap things up, Ardra is a very complex nakshatra.
Yeah, it is. It's multifaceted.
Multifaceted, intense, transformative, but ultimately it has the potential for for great things.
Absolutely. It's about embracing the journey.
Embracing the journey, yeah. And for you, our listener,
Yeah.
whether Ardra is prominent in your chart or not,
Right.
we hope this deep dive has given you some insights into this powerful lunar mansion.
And maybe some things to think about.
Yeah, to ponder. Like, how can we embrace the storms in our own lives?
Right. The challenges, the hardships.
Right. And use them to grow and evolve.
To become our best selves.
To become our best selves, yeah. And if you're interested in learning more about Vedic astrology,
Yeah, there's a whole world out there.
there's a whole world. We encourage you to keep exploring.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.